we're here. This is Planning and Zoning Committee and Council. I see a lot of different faces as long as we become members of the committee that been here so often. We are three individuals who make recommendations to council. The specific issue I think most of you are interested in tonight is the land use plan update. And specifically, we've been looking at the heights component of that for a few meetings now. And we hope to finalize that issue tonight, at least at the committee. It will then, at some date down the road, come back to the full council. But the committee hopes to finish its discussion on that particular issue tonight. And I know there's an area for, you can't hear me. This is about the best volume like you do, but I'll try and shout louder. With calls for citizens' concerns, I assume most of you are here with respect to the heights. So we're going to take that up as the first item, but with one preliminary matter. Do either of you have any issues with last month's minutes? Okay. Those are deemed approved by acclamation. And we will then move up discussion to the land use plan update. I think the way we'll proceed is to have Paul and Leah give us any thoughts they may have heard from residents. And reactions, I think specifically last time we were here, we were looking at an alternative suggestion that anticipated some degree of commercial development along State Route 25. And we wanted that idea to kind of marinate for everyone, the three of us and all of you. So I think we'll start by allowing for some comments by Paul and Leah. And then what I may ask to do is if others support those comments or disagree, I mean, we don't need to have everyone in the room stand up and say, I agree with what they said. But we'll figure out if they're representing what most of you are thinking or if there are any other divergent views. So having said that, Paul, by virtue of seniority, I guess you'll get to go first.
I would prefer to defer to the comments of the residents first. I think it's more important that you hear from them than from me. Because, I mean, they're the ones that live there, and they're the ones that are affected by this. And I just think it's important for you to hear from them rather than a representative's comments. I will have some comments of my own.
Okay.
But I would really like for you to hear comments of the others here who came to tell you what they think about this.
All right. Good point. Well taken. Leah, you want to?
Yep.
Well, I'll start with the usual name and address nonsense.
Leah Poncello, 25614 Broad Street, Perrysburg, Ohio. So we actually had a meeting. Corey was present. Mark Weber was there. PHCA hosted that meeting. I had already had an original meeting planned, but that was there was no need for our residents to hear duplicate information and to even be any more confused. So I refrained from anything, and I talked to individuals separately. In fact, I hosted a meeting yesterday with individuals that approached me and told them what I know. In the past month, we have done a ton of research. We have done a ton of outreach, and we have reached out to legal and also development organizations nationwide. We've also reached out to people nationwide, and we have a few articles that are going out in New York City and California. At that time, I had told them that they had requested interviews from me due to connections that I have with a fraternity who I used to represent at Ohio State. I was not a sister or a brother of that fraternity, but I have great friends that came out of that fraternity. And because of that, they have, this is what they do. I also have a state representative from district in Columbus who has given me a lot of pointers. I have an excellent advocate here in the city of Perrysburg. I hope you don't mind me using her name, Terry A. Cox. She had given me a lot of pointers, helped me with a lot of things. and what you guys have reviewed and discussed over the months. I believe and I commend myself for what I've done in the past month. We have looked over with a lot of people about things, and I've tried to look over processes. I wanted to address a few things that were said in the last meeting. There was 2 people here that said, well, this could take over 10 to 20 years, maybe even 30, I think is what was quoted in the article that Brody had said. Well, guess what? 10, 20, 30 years, I'm still gonna be around. Will I probably have as much fight in me? Probably not, because I'll probably like to enjoy some sort of non-fighting. The goal that I have and the thing that we have set forth with the committee that we formed is that we do not care if people sell their homes. We do not care. You do whatever you want with your property. It is your God-given right. That's what you get to do here in this lovely nation we have. I'm not telling anybody not to sell it. What I'm telling you is that I want to stop commercial development to continue encroaching on my neighborhood. I'm tired of the conversation to keep coming every single time of picking on us all the time. This isn't the first time we've had this conversation, and I can probably tell you that won't be the last just yet, but if I get a last say, you better believe it's gonna be the last time we talk about this. I've also looked over properties and see that wanted to know why we were so fixed on making a solid line. So I pulled up, I had a friend who used to be a surveyor, pull up some information for me, and I have a map of what the heights used to look like long time ago, and 25 had a straight line that ran across and the parcels were just right. So then it started to make me look at some things about everybody on 25 and how this would affect, and I kept looking and saying, you know what, I'm missing something that's completely obvious. So then I took a little bit further of a deeper look, and I asked my friend, hey, can you give me the survey that was done for Cafe Marie's? He's like, yeah, sure. So can you answer some questions for me? He said, yeah. So he gave me the survey for Cafe Marie's, which was done, and that Cafe Marie's shows the 2 lot sizes here. What you don't see though on most commercial surveys is it'll tell you what the distance is. These 2 lots right there, one of them sits where my aunt is. So then I looked at the auditor's website, and now I know there is a disclaimer on the auditor's website to say that it's not always correct, and there's things that could be it's not to be used for legal. But, so then I looked at a map from 1998, and I saw that this is where Cafe Marie's is supposed to be. And I see that my aunt's parcels are completely fine. Looking at the new map, it looks like there's encroachments. It looks like the parking lot that sits behind Cafe Marie's is on my aunt's property, which she's paying taxes on. It also shows that 25, that's why a lot of those properties are. So the property that was sold, it made me question to myself, is that even an actual sale? Because for me, an encroachment, that's stolen land. So then I went back and I started saying, all right, who are these LLCs and who are all these people? So I had a person investigate every single LLC. I looked at every LLC, and to my disgust, I saw that there were people who sit on political platforms in the city and the township that has ties to these LLCs. Thank you, prospectors. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Then there was comments made of, well, you're not giving anybody else an option to do what they want with their land. Now I see why. Because everybody wants a buck. And the crazy part about it is I can guarantee you that if it was a historical part of Perrysburg, they would be pissed if you go over there and say, we're gonna take your houses. Eminent domain is eminent domain. You put it on the table, say it. Stop saying acquire. Acquire means the same thing. So my whole thing is this: leave us alone, fix the line that it is, and we'll go ahead and work with legal teams to fix that line and get that line properly done, because for insurance purposes, I can guarantee you that some of those people don't even know that if something were to happen, they could be liable. So my whole thing is this: we want to develop our own plan. And it won't cost anybody, your constituents or our constituents, anything. And we'll collaborate, we'll figure something out on our own, and then we'll present it to you. Because that's what we have. That's the power we got as citizens. We're allowed to do that. I'm tired of having this conversation. And the whole point of the new plan that we come up with will then make sure that you guys have to answer for that too. Answer questions to why things are the way they are. Why are things continuing to be a conversation? And why some people who you all are affiliated with are purchasing property there too as prospectors. Here's the thing, buckle up, because it's gonna be a bumpy ride.
Specifically, the request is just remove the heights from the plan.
100%, let us come up with our own plan and don't annex anything else yet. Let us figure something out.
That's a little bit further. So you want us to limit the growth of the city?
Yeah,
Speak up, I can't even hear you.
What I hear Lee is saying is that we, as representatives of the city, should limit the growth of the city, and when someone who owns their own property wishes to annex into the city, we should say no.
you should say no now until we get a say. It's our property. You spent 6 months
No,
developing.
no, it's not your property. It's the property owned by the individual who owns it.
Oh, the
My
last
mom's property.
time I checked, the people who gave me a voice to speak, it is my property because I'm representing them.
So are you talking,
So I think what
Whose
he's
property
asking-
was it when you guys decided to encroach on it?
I just want to get something clear so we can have the conversation. Are you talking about forceful annexation or volunteer? Because right now, as far as I'm concerned, and we can look into the history of it, anything that's been annexed over the last however many years from properties that have been voluntarily annexed.
Right.
Meaning they asked
you
to be
want
a part
us-
of the city. Do you want us to deny those requests? Is that what you're saying? The people that own the property and ask to be a part of the city?
Yeah,
You want us to
if-
deny that?
Yeah, until because you're gonna just keep encroaching. When's the line gonna stop? When's the line gonna stop?
okay, I understand.
it all?
We've already encroached.
So you're asking us to restrict the city in its growth?
Yeah,
Yes, elected officials of the city,
to commercial,
just for commercial.
for commercial use,
Okay,
to stop
so
the
You
kids.
want to tell the city how to develop any property that is annexed into the city.
It should be, you guys have enough already on 25.
If others want to annex in, why are we supposed to tell them no, or tell them, here's how you have to develop your property?
If that's what you feel is the best thing for your city to continue to grow, to push out a neighborhood of history, maybe not historic, because we don't have buildings that are considered historic, but if you want to keep pushing out a neighborhood like that, and that's what you want to do, that's fine. Go ahead and do what you want. But I can tell you, what we're asking is to leave us out of the plan, leave the line, or say that you'll leave the line the way it is, like I asked Brody from the beginning. Leave the line jagged, the way it is, and that's where commercial development stops. If we can have the line that way, leave it just that way.
Okay, does anyone else have a comment? I see Anita standing up, so.
Good evening, I'm Anita Sanchez-Cerda, fourth generation at 12265 Harold Street, Perrysburg Heights, Perrysburg, Ohio, 43551. I just want to read a statement that I sent to council earlier today and the mayor. In 1993, the City of Perrysburg Comprehensive Plan update reviewed all aspects of Perrysburg Heights neighborhood, including but not limited to reviewing the impact of commercial development on the neighborhood, the importance of retaining the existing character of the neighborhood, and the short and long-term interest of the community. We ask that Perrysburg City Council and its Planning and Zoning Committee amend the land use plan currently under review to continue to recognize the Perrysburg Heights neighborhood as a single-family residential area with very limited flexibility in deviating from that form of zoning within its currently existing geographical boundaries in Perrysburg Township. In doing so, the city should limit general zoning commitments to those that directly serve the Perrysburg Heights neighborhood and preserve the residential character of the neighborhood. The city should use this plan to make future land use decisions within its city limits, to recognize that the Perrysburg Heights neighborhood is not within the city limits and to commit to the preservation of Perrysburg Heights' current boundaries with very limited flexibility to alter its residential character. And from what I understand, the only thing we have that was given to us before this meeting was the plan. So I'm just referring to the plan that has a zigzag boundary, and then as you can see in blue, that is all of what is Perrysburg Heights currently as residents. Thank you.
I'm assuming many of you support what both Adina and Leah said. I see Juan has his hand up.
I'm Juan Arteaga, as you know. And I went through the comprehensive plan that was drawn up back in 1987, revised in April 27 of 93. And in going through this, I was very surprised. I was told that this was no longer the plan they were using. They were going through the plan that Mr. Brody here had made. But in looking at, for those of you that may have the comprehensive plan, on page 62, based on this comprehensive plan, it has a section that says at least one street of Perrysburg Heights should connect to 25, which has been done. There will be Fort Meigs Road that intersects 25 and goes over to Little Commons. And then he goes on about rezoning. And the condition used was consistent with zoning code for single-family use elsewhere. Then we go to page 90. And the top paragraph says, Perrysburg Heights, Perrysburg Township. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Perrysburg residents, Perrysburg Heights residents, were never informed or asked about their opinion, because at the time this was drawn up, they were talking about Perrysburg, and nothing was set out to indicate that the Heights would be involved in this. So a lot of people, to my knowledge, are unaware as to what's going on. But in this paragraph, it says towards the bottom, the neighborhood may also wish to have its own landscape features. We have one of the residents here, Mr. Ibarra, who's right next to one of the businesses. And I believe he brought up a statement that said that they were going to put some green space in there, and nothing was ever done. But this is in the comprehensive plan that was built, that was done in 1987. But yet I'm getting told that this is not the plan that they're using. But what's being done is coming off this plan. So I guess my interest here is there's something that's not being said right here to the residents here of the community of Perrysburg Heights, and needs to be corrected. And more input should be asked out of the residents of the Heights so they can have a better understanding of what we're trying to do here. Also, I think it was page 56. This is nothing more than to broaden its tax base, which I can understand that we do need growth, and of course to have that, you need money coming in. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Others who may wish to step up to the dais, or otherwise, I'll assume from your silence.
live in the Heights, but I'd like to
what's
speak.
said. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Erin Bilski, 1798 Arrow Lane, Perrysburg. And while I don't live in the Heights, I have played softball, worked with, and with many of the people that did live in the Heights and have grown up there. I am saddened and distraught over this. This is ridiculous. This is an R30 zone, a residential zone. Since '93, they were guaranteed the residential. Only if they wanted something. They don't want this, it's very clear. This is their community. This is where they choose to live in this community. I've lived here 28 years and I've raised my boys here. And I am proud to call these people neighbors and friends. Perrysburg is for everyone, everyone. To take 30 homes from their neighborhood, you're not only pushing them out of the Heights, you're pushing them out of Perrysburg. This is affordable housing. This is generations of family who raise their kids here, who love this community. You'll know me. I worked on Perrysburg Playground Project, the levee, soccer commissioner. I've been in this community, 21 years at the Y. Perrysburg is inclusive. It should be inclusive. This is the first time I have not been proud to be a member of this community. I went through Levis. You got empty storefronts. You got plenty of land over there. Why are you going into a residential neighborhood? Taking homes. You got other commercial development. You got lots. You got parcels right in Levis that have signs on them for sale. Come on. Just like I say to my boys growing up, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Doesn't make it right. This is not right.
My name is Ricardo Ibarra. If this plan goes through, I'm one of them that goes first. I'm 68 years old. I've been here since 57. What am I going to do to start all over again? Then I have a sister behind me that's in her 80s. Where does she pick up and leave? That's right where you guys are proposing that road. I'm right next to urgent care. I don't plan to leave. So do we have a choice, or is this an invasion?
Do you mind if I ask you a question? Why do you think, because I'm trying, this is the thing that I'm trying to wrap my head, why do you think you have to leave or sell your house or do it?
Well, we're here for some reason.
Well, yeah, no, I agree, but I think that's one of the fundamental, the roots of the issue is that,
This has been going on for years, probably before even you were born. Like I said, I'm one of the younger ones, and I'm 68 years old and I'm 69. My sister's going to be 80-some years old. It's not just put your clothes in the suitcase and walk out the door. You guys will still be sitting in your living room. We won't.
Well, I'll echo Corey's question in part. This is in response to what Aaron said. This, and we've gotten letters from people who say we're going to annex these properties or not. We've gotten letters from people saying we're going to use eminent domain. We're not. This is a comprehensive plan, largely for the city and its immediate neighbors. I always viewed it as a plan for the community, but you know, some of the comments I hear sounds like we are compelling annexation and we're then being a commercial developer. That's not the case. That's not the case, Leah. You're wrong.
Okay, all I want to do is stay where I'm at. That's all I ask.
Don't sell your land.
I don't plan to. Thank you.
Let me just.
My name is Teresa A. Cox, and like Erin Bilski, I do not live in the Heights. You've already been hearing from me and are probably rather tired of hearing my complaints about this plan. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I like about your land use plan, and then I would like to add to that. I understand that the city needs income. I looked at the land use plan, and one of the things that I noticed about it was that there were some nice details provided about how much income would be produced ideally by each of the 3 focus plans, excluding the heights. And for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure that all of you on the dais know, for the boundary crossings, there would be an increased income between income and property tax of $278,000 annually proposed. For south boundary, there would be an increase of $727,000 annually, if ideal. For south downtown, the new increased income between property and income tax is $853,000. I appreciate your looking at that. I understand that development needs to happen within the downtown area and south boundary. I live on East 5th. Some of that will be close to me. I'm just hoping that if it gets developed, it's developed with some charm. It is surprising to me to hear the question raised from the dais about why people think they would be forced to sell. Because you're all really sophisticated. You're much more sophisticated than I am. And you're probably way more sophisticated in the development process than any of us are. And what you're doing is saying that people should ignore the realities of what's going to happen. When the city developed Levis Commons, when you approved the zoning, I do not find it possible to believe that someone in the city didn't realize that the heights would be affected. Because all you have to do is look at the map and you see Levis Commons and you see the income there, and then you look at the heights and you say, well, I think we could develop that. And that was your first plan. I don't believe that when you say, just don't sell your house, that you are overlooking the complexity of development and how the more commercialism or the more commercial zoning that you allow, the more it affects everybody's housing there. That's a sophisticated understanding, and you have that. When people are living next to what's already commercially zoned, am I correct that they can then ask to be annexed into commercial zoning? So I'm correct in that. So the people who live next to commercial zoning feel lucky because you might be able to sell your lot for a little bit more, but you're still not going to be able to buy in Perrysburg. That's right. You know better than this. And that is my disappointment, is to have come to all of these meetings and heard this naive request or naive statement, don't sell. I am appalled by that. Because you know that with the plan that was originally developed and with this current plan, you still are opening the door to more commercialization and to the people being there forced out. Yes. My final question is, in the way that the Heights was included in this plan originally, it was the only one that didn't have any income prospects provided. So my question to you is, when you change the Heights, when you include more commercialization, how much are you going to get? How much are we as a city, you as my representatives, how much will you be saving me my taxes by forcing these people out of their home and essentially ending this community that's been here that, as Leah said, if it were in the historic district, you wouldn't touch in a million years. But you're touching them, and you are opening up their community ending and trying to present yourself as naive about it, and that is appalling to me. I have voted for many of you on this dais, and I expect the same kind of concern and care for you and honesty as I've always expected you to have. And I don't think you're providing it on this, and it's a great disappointment. I still want to know, and I do want to have this announced. How much are you going to make off of them? How much will the city make every year by changing the zoning in the Heights? I hope you get it back to me soon.
Teresa, can you stay right there for a second? Because I watched your podcast. I think all of us over the last couple months, and I'm sorry you're disappointed. I think that's partly why we're here today, is to dive into this discussion. I can speak for myself only, but I know that when that initial plan came out, the first time I had seen it was in the media, okay? So when I watched, I think it's Perrysburg Pulse podcast you were on, right, recently, one of the questions you said was never answered was, where did this plan come from in the first place? Because it wasn't in the original versions. You'd heard that from conversations with other council people. So I think that's maybe something we should clear up, because that was an unanswered question that you had, right?
Yes.
So, Brody, can you kind of give us the history of how the Heights got included in the first place?
And why it wasn't in the index.
Yeah, because I think that will be helpful with the conversation as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important question. Originally, the boundary, there's been questions about, do you plan for the current city, or do you plan for what the city is in the future? Okay, so we looked at corp boundaries, we looked at water boundaries, we looked at sanitary sewer boundaries, we looked at potential growth opportunities for annexation. We chose to go with the water sewer service area because that is theoretically the yield of the size of the city. The question became, and we knew this had been a long-standing issue in Perrysburg Heights. There's different viewpoints and opinions on what should happen there, if anything. So the reason that it was included, and I think there's a misconception that it's not common to plan for land outside the city.
Right.
I would actually argue that that's the most appropriate place to plan, is for what your city future is, not necessarily what it is now. There's value to planning inside your city. I will admit that. But there's an advantage to planning outside of your city for
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with what you're saying. What I'm not hearing is the answer to the question.
And you're not letting me get to that point yet.
Okay.
So that's the reason originally that we felt uncomfortable excluding Perrysburg Heights, because it is such a large island in the middle of the city, completely surrounded by the city. Okay. So this is a township property, surrounded on every side by city-owned property. We knew this was going to be a very contentious issue, and we said, do we ignore this and not plan, which we felt, myself as a city employee, accountable to the 25,000 residents that live here, that we would not be doing our jobs by excluding this and not properly planning for an area of Perrysburg that very well in the future could be, in any number of years, become a part of the city. So at that stage, we were going back and forth to say, do we include this, do we not include this? We knew that it was the proverbial hornet's nest. There was questions about what, after the first plan came out that did not feature Perrysburg Heights. There was a question about, what does this mean for Perrysburg Heights? There was questions from Paul Balazs. Paul was in on some of the land use plan meetings. We had follow-up meetings with Paul, and there was a request to more fully understand, what does this mean for the Heights and its residents? So we said, you know what? We believe that we should have included it the first time. So we're going to do that. We're going to pick that case study up. That was not one of the original study area focus groups. We picked that up and imported it at a later point in time. I would say, in my opinion, that was a direct request of Paul for further explanation as to what this plan could mean for the Heights. And what I will say is you also referenced several of our focus areas: South Boundary, American Steel Treating, which involved Master Chemicals, some Perry's Landing areas in our downtown. These were all very broad concepts to say these are vision type things. All this is, in all of these locations, doesn't matter what focus group we're talking about, is in answer to the question of what happens if something else happens. For example, if someone in the Heights sells their property, the new purchaser annexes in the city, it's a very clear, loud message what the city's plans would be if something happens. So what I want to say here is the whole idea, I know you took great offense to the idea of don't sell your property, but there's more truth to that than you're giving it at this moment. Because the city is not the trigger, okay? The city is creating a reaction to when any of you individually trigger an event to happen, which is a sale of the property, the transfer of the property, the annexation of the property, all of those things. We don't trigger and react. is what Tim was trying to say. If we simply react, we need to have a plan in place that provides consistent, coherent development in the event that the opportunity arises where the city needs to take that property into its jurisdiction and assign zoning to it and development rights so that we end up with something that's appropriate and in the best interest of the city based on its location.
Mr. Walters, I don't want to interrupt. Did I interrupt?
I think I'm done. I think I answered
Okay.
your question.
I still haven't heard the answer to my question that actually was asked of me in the podcast about why it wasn't in the index, why it appeared to be inserted at a later date. I'll add some questions. Why it appeared to be inserted at a later date without an indication that it was in the report. And so unless you read the whole 112 pages, you wouldn't know what was there. And I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been alerted by a friend. So,
Can I answer that before you get too far? So the answer to that is, as I started to explain, this was not originally in the report. So that title sheet, table of contents was all created not anticipating the heights being brought into the report. That case study was generated after those versions went out.
okay.
This was then a supplemental piece of information that went into the report. And this draft report that you're talking about was not in any of the table of contents or anything like that, the index.
And
This is not a final document. So
I understand that.
that portion of the plan has not caught up yet.
Right.
Obviously, that will be inserted. We haven't talked about 96% of the land use plan. We spent 100% of our time talking about the 4% of the land use plan.
Yes, and I would like to comment about that because most of the land use plan, when I examined it, was not problematic for me. Like I said, I'm just kind of hoping that there will be some charm in the changes that happens. So the fact that there's not dispute about that says probably to me that people aren't concerned about it. And so the fact that you have spent 96% of the time on this means that people are concerned about it. It's kind of like the squeaky wheel, and this is what people are concerned about. The fact that it was inserted as a draft without an acknowledgement that it was inserted as a draft after the initial is just perhaps poor work on somebody's part. But it didn't feel that way to most people that read it. I am very clear, and I think anybody who's been following this is very clear that the land use plan is a theoretical approach that says if development happens, of the places in plans, where is development most likely to occur most quickly, in your opinion? Would it be in the commercial area along 25 by the Heights, or would it be on Indiana, or would it be in Country Charm? Like, my guess is that the Heights would be vulnerable to more commercial development pretty quickly, where Indiana and Country Charm would probably not. And if you can get a buyer or like a developer for the work along the west boundary in Indiana, that could go, but it would still take some time. You're still missing the point, I'm afraid. And I'm going back to you guys have a sophisticated sense of development that I don't have, but am learning a little bit, and that most of us don't have, except there's common sense that the way that it's set up in the Heights with the ability for individual lots to be annexed, right? Individual lots. I own a lot in the Heights. I can ask to be annexed to the city. If I'm next to a commercial zone, I can ask to be annexed and have my zoning changed. Am I right? Okay. So, to deny that that can be decimating to the community is not understandable to me. I don't understand how you can say that. I don't understand how you can say, just don't sell your lot, when the pressure of commercialization and the pressure of speculation that's already occurring there when residents of the Heights have been approached by numerous people as this has been going on, and more publicly saying, sell your land, sell your house, you want to sell? The presence of speculators that are already there that have been identified by the people looking through the auditor's file. What, in my belief, is happening is that the city, by taking what appears to me to be an unsophisticated, we're innocent in all of this planning. It's not our fault that you guys are getting commercialized. It's not our fault that these people are buying it. It's not our fault. We're just responding to the folks who want to be annexed. I don't think that you're that unsophisticated, because what's happening is the speculators are in there and they are buying up, and I don't believe you don't know that. And what the city does by taking the stance that you're presenting, at least as far as I understand it now, what you are doing is you're enabling speculation on the backs of these people, because they won't be able to afford what's going to go in. And that's not acceptable to me. And let me ask you, where am I not understanding? Where am I wrong?
Okay,
That's fine. Yeah, you've had quite a bit of time now. Leah,
Yes.
can speak.
That's fine.
You can finish answering your point.
I can tell you where I stand, Teresa, and I think you're right. Commercialization is why we're all here. It's why we've taken a considerable amount of time to discuss this issue. I don't think any of us up here have shied away of trying to address it publicly with members of the Heights community, people that are heavily involved with the Heights community. Now, so if we're addressing commercialization, and let's use some terms, gentrification of this area, okay? We need a tool to combat that as a city. We're dealing with a township property, okay, and a city that has annexation agreements for the use of water that were signed long ago that allows for forcible annexation that has not been used, okay? So when we're dealing with annexation requests, and quite frankly, we have one coming in right now on the north side of the Heights. I think it's quite a few parcels, okay? So let's be real about that. What we need are tools to make it so our decisions on zoning aren't arbitrary, okay? We can't create spot zoning. So we as a city, when we bring in, we have to rely on tools like land use plans
I understand that.
to deny requests and try to qualm that. So as a city, and this is my understanding of it, okay? And keep in mind, reasonable minds can differ from what my opinion is. So I view this, what Brody created, and I know people don't like it, okay, is a tool to try to stop that commercialization. So you say, where does it stop? To me, when you're creating this roadway, which I don't necessarily like, I'm okay if it's just a straight line with no roadway, because I get the worry of eminent domain, okay? But if it's just a straight line, the reason that's there is because usually when you're creating city plans, there's a transition from a commercial district or industrial to residential. And sometimes you use multifamily housing to create that transition. Sometimes you use roadways, sometimes you use parks, okay? So that's what that is a tool to do a transition, a boundary between that commercial encroachment, okay? So if we create that line, yeah, there are some houses left behind that are subject to commercialization, okay? But to me, when I'm looking at this, I don't necessarily want to lock this person that has a house that doesn't have to sell it. They can choose to sell it at some point. I don't want to lock them into selling a residential property that is stuck in a residential zone and will be for less value than they could potentially get it as a commercial property while this transition's occurring, right? I'm trying to create a straight line. So that's the way I see it. I don't think everybody's going to agree with that. So I understand why you just want to stop it, okay? But when we're city officials looking for a city plan, to me, we have some expectation that it actually looks like a city plan, okay? There's some sort of transition, okay? Now that being said, the way I try to look at this simply is this zone that's in yellow, where some of the commercializations happen, and the residential areas, I understand there's probably like 30 some homes that need it. Do you have that number?
Yeah, it's built there.
Yeah, it's right around like 30-some homes. It's my understanding that the city has no intention of buying any property, okay? Or forcing anybody to sell it unless they voluntarily sell. And then the people that buy those would have to voluntarily ask for annexation and then put in a zoning request for consideration. Now, to me, this top area represents continuing with no plan, okay? What can happen if there's no plan in place? That's going to continue. So this is the area, when I view it this simply, this is the area that there's going to be really no plan for it, and it's going to continue to be commercialized over the years, okay? I don't know how quickly that would happen, but I'm pretty sure it would with how Levis is and the other commercial properties, okay? The rest of this, in this plan, would be planned for to stay residential, is my understanding of this plan, okay? And that is the way, if the Heights is going to remain in the township, and someone over here, so right now, on this north side, someone's asking for annexation. If we lock this in as residential, we have a reason, a legal reason, and an interest in denying that zoning request and saying, hey, you prospected, you speculated wrong.
I explained that to somebody this afternoon on social media, that that's the purpose of the land plan and the land use plan in terms of protection. But what I want to, then my final ask, because I agree with you, I've taken a long time. My final ask, and then I'll sit, and then Paul maybe can describe whether he really asked for this, is if there's to be a plan and you're going to do that, what is the problem with doing the jagged line that already exists, other than the fact that it's not straight and bureaucratic? That's all my question.
Because it covers up there.
So I'll finish what I was going to say. I appreciate that. To me, that it all falls back to when we're creating a city plan, I like it to try to look like a city plan.
No.
And I, again, people can disagree with me. This is an opinion of mine. I have to weigh in the city's interest when I'm making that decision. And I don't want to lock in someone next to a gas station that's going to be a house forever, that's next to a dumpster. That's my personal opinion when I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the city's interest. Now, all that being said, I've had quite a few discussions. And it seems like the overwhelming sentiment is that the Heights would like to be left out of this plan. Okay, and I'm not gonna sit up here and pretend like I know what is better for your community than you do. If the Heights does not want to be a part of the planning and zoning or the future land use plan, I respect that. I'm not going to think I know better than you and vote otherwise, okay? So you're gonna get my vote to exclude the Heights from the plan. And I hope you do all the due diligence of trying to create your own plan and getting that locked in with the township trustees. But to me, there's a strong danger of when these annexation and zoning requests come in, that the commercialization continues because there's not the tool going on. That's my worry of leaving it out. So I will vote for no plan, but that comes with the words of caution. I hope that there's continued work to try to preserve this community, because I think this is an attempt of the city's attempt to try to help with that. And it is what it is, I think, at this point. So.
I have a question on that. Say you do take that line if it was to go through. Now, that would make, say if this person sells, this one doesn't want to sell, this one doesn't want to sell, and various do sell. Now, does that make that whole line commercial? If that line goes through the way they're proposing?
Yeah, that means that
I'm not sure I understand.
what he's asking is that pretty much what happens if you have pockets of people that want to sell on 25. Are you going to then say that that's going to be only commercial then going forward when they sell? And
that straight line you're talking about. Would
hold
that
on.
be called that commercial?
Okay, hold on. Okay, I saw you shake your head. Basically, what he's saying is that if this plan goes through, it's going to be considered commercial and it can never be built again as residential.
That's what I want.
Okay, so my understanding is the person that buys it So it would be someone is selling their house voluntarily to another party, another private party, and then that party would have to come request annexation for the city. Most likely that's going to be granted. And then there's going to be a zoning request. If they ask for commercial and they're in this line, my guess is they're going to make some attempts to make a commercial property that makes sense.
The whole line.
Anywhere in that district. That would be my understanding.
See, that's the
But
thing though, because my question is there.
Because I think he's
Okay.
misunderstanding your question.
you can answer if you want. Okay.
Oh, no, so he was saying, if let's say, this person sells and this person sells, but these in the middle don't sell. He's saying it's the whole line going to be held to commercial.
So if annexation occurs, you have to be contiguous to the city.
So that will make
So
it
you
more-
have to be touching a city property
So
in
then-
order to be annexed.
So then, my next question on that is, say something was to happen in my house, it got burned down or something, then being commercial, I wouldn't be able to rebuild it.
You would still be in the township unless you asked to be annexed into the city, and the township laws would govern your zoning and your rebuild.
So to answer your question, you're saying if one property close that's right next to a commercial development sells, one further down the block sells.
Okay,
This one that's closest to the commercial developer is the only one that can ask to be annexed in. The one at the very end of the block is still residential township.
so I could say residential.
Absolutely.
That's all I want to know.
No, but if they make that straight line, you're automatically going to be commercial.
No, that's what I'm saying now.
No, because he was asking, if the house burns down, he's still in the town.
He's still in the
So he can rebuild.
Let him know that,
Rebuild.
yeah, I mean, I think
Oh,
he's-
that, yes.
yes,
So
please let him know
yeah, if you're not annexed in, you're still in the township, and your house, something happens to your house, you can rebuild it as is, it's still residential. The township is only.
All right. Paul, do you want to, Brody, do you want to
Yeah.
comment? Wait, 1 second, Paul, we'll let Brody run off some thoughts on the plan, and then we'll...
Yeah. What I wanted to offer, since I know we have members of the media here, I followed podcasts, I followed the social media posts, and what really stuck with me is what I'll call the well-intentioned misinformation, which is probably what brought a lot of you here today. Okay. What I want to make very clear about this is the drawing that I created here. The history of this drawing is important. As you know, this is what I'll call version 2 of this. This isn't necessarily a plan that I fully supported as an employee and agent of the city of Perrysburg. This was a plan that I created in an attempt to help mediate the outcomes and the consequences for the city of Perrysburg and Perrysburg Township. This drawing really was born out of a joint meeting with Leah, I forget the other gentleman that joined us. Scott, a township trustee, one of our council members, to try to come to a compromise. And the compromise in this drawing is, and I understand that you may not all like the compromise, and that's the sign of compromise, is that not everybody gets what they want out of the situation. But one of the facts that is indisputable that I want to point out is, and I'll kind of ask a question here. When you look at this map, the area that is shown to the east of the Access Drive that we keep talking about, the balance of the Perrysburg Heights property, what would you all agree is the percentage, what percentage of area would you say this is of Perrysburg Heights right now? I think a fair number, probably over 80%, probably 85%. Would anybody disagree with that? Ma'am, what would your answer be?
The map is wrong.
Well, the map is what it is. It's done by a surveyor, so we can't.
It is wrong. Those two lots that are beside me are commercial already. So those two lots on Harold Street are wrong. So if that's wrong, that probably is not right.
Okay, well, I'm going to attest that the map is correct. So if
It's
anybody-
not.
Okay.
Okay, your objection is noted.
So my argument is that this represents roughly 85% of the boundaries of Perrysburg Heights. The compromise that the city was presenting this as is that 85% of Perrysburg Heights would be preserved. And I think there's this misconception in social media, mainstream media, all the folks that have reached out and had these conversations, This is an attempt to destroy Perrysburg Heights.
It's on the people.
You're leaving out the 15% that are gonna get their houses taken.
I will.
How 5%?
I will acknowledge, as Mr. Coleman explained, some of the areas in here are what we refer to as transitional areas, okay, according to this plan. But we need to agree that this is not an effort to destroy Perrysburg Heights. In fact, 85% of Perrysburg Heights is proposed to be protected by city documents in the land use plan. Are there some painful areas here that are in this transitional area that are shown that affect some of you? 100%, we understand that. But what is also important is my former comments when I said the city doesn't trigger events in these areas. We react to these events. So that is the case. So I just want to make sure that's clear, that we may disagree on what happens in this area here, but 85% of the plan that I drew up, that I said I don't fully support, was created for the preservation of Perrysburg Heights.
Can I ask you one question? So if today you decide not to move forward, and wait on us to try and come up with another plan as Leah's leading on, when the person, the LLC that bought the 20 lots across from the community center is already going to be in front of the annexation department whenever that next meeting is, you're talking about your willfulness to preserve the heights. What are you going to recommend if that person gets request annexed in the city? It's not a resident. It's not anybody who's lived there their whole life.
And that's a very, very important question, because this is not theoretical. This is something that is happening. So as soon as the surveys and the legal descriptions are complete, I expect that I will be forced to make that decision. The folks up here with me will be forced to make that decision. So let's actually talk about that one. You're referring to the 19 properties across the street from Perrysburg Heights Community Center. According to the plans that we have now and the logic of things that are happening in that area, if that request were brought to me today, my office, the Planning Commission, and presumably City Council, I don't want to speak for them, they're elected folks, they can do what they choose. All of the facts and the documentation and the things that are occurring in that area, that person who would be requesting annexation would be requesting what we refer to as an assignment of permanent zoning. So once we welcome you into the city, we have to give you a zoning district. Could be residential, could be commercial, could be industrial, right? What does Jefferson Street look like? It's a very industrialized area. Are there some homes on the south side? Absolutely, we understand that. The areas of Jefferson Street that are in the city are heavy commercial, heavy industrial, light industrial, right? The recommendation from our office would be to continue that, because we would look to adjacent land uses that are in the city of Perrysburg. Former Ohio Cat, heavy equipment operators, trucking companies, all of these sorts of things. It would be appropriate for us to recommend a light industrial or commercial zoning for that area. If this plan, if you were to be excluded from the planning process, like has been explained here, that would be what I would recommend. What the Planning Commission would probably recommend to City Council. The City Council would probably look at the surroundings and say the logic is sound, and they would approve commercial industrial zoning for that property. With this plan here, that would assure that if, when that time comes, that property comes into the city and the assignment of permanent zoning is requested, that would be listed as a residential only property and that no commercial use of that property could be made. And I think it's an important question, so I appreciate you asking that.
Do you want to speak?
Paul Belizas, 503 West Front Street. Well, first, let me try to briefly address the question of how we got into the plan. And I don't want to get sidetracked by that because we're pretty much past it. But
Could you be louder?
yeah.
Take your mask off.
Yeah. Right. There isn't anyone from the Perrysburg Heights Association or from the Perrysburg Heights neighborhood that requested inclusion in this plan. And fortunately, there's documentation that's dated that confirms all of that. And we've been through this before. We've talked about it at previous meetings. the association originally found out that we were going to be included in the plan when we got a call from city administration telling us that was going to be the case, and that there would be a virtual town hall meeting at which it would be discussed. It was the last of 4. And I got picked to participate and watch. And your consultants went through the first 3 of your focus areas in great detail, and then they got to the 4th one with just a page, and this is what I remember, that just said Perrysburg Heights redevelopment. And so I tried to quick figure out the chat function, which I'd never used before in Zoom, to ask what that meant. And Tim Bachbrader, whose name I didn't know at the time, said that it would mean that at some point some cottages might be established in the neighborhood based on the small lots. And so then we asked to talk with them to find out more about what they had in mind about redevelopment of Perrysburg Heights. And that meeting by phone occurred, I think, in April of last year. And Aaron was also on the line. And they started talking about a green space that we just saw on computer screen, and we couldn't really tell very much about it. But he said that there would be someday houses built around it. And so, and I had one of my other board members there. We said, who's going to live in those houses? And Aaron said, well, that's going to be determined by market forces. And so then we immediately wrote a letter to the city, which I think was in May, saying that, reiterating the conversation that we had with these guys, and telling the city that they needed to protect the Perrysburg Heights neighborhood, that it had a long history and tradition, that it had a great deal to improve its own lot, but also the lot of many people throughout the city of Perrysburg, and that it needed to be protected against gentrification. Now, they had said in that phone conference that they were going to be issuing their final draft the following week, and so we tried to get that letter to the city as quickly as possible. What emerged was the first draft, which is dated, and I believe they took longer than a week. I think it came out dated June, something like that, but I got it. It has a date on it. And that draft didn't say a word about Perrysburg Heights, not one word, until you got to page, I think, 46, when it showed a color-coded map of the Heights and Levis Commons, and they were both color-coded the same as mixed use. And it showed that that would be developed basically as a mirror image of Levis Commons. That's what Perrysburg Heights was going to look like. And when we saw that, we went to the first hearing related to that, which was in front of the Plan Commission, and we expressed outrage. And then we subsequently asked the city to reconsider its plan to do those things to this community. And so it was apparently, my understanding is it was sent back to your consultants, and what came out was not only did they not take into account any of our concerns, but they came out with exactly the same picture of Perrysburg Heights, added it as a focus area, and then added a green space with, I think you've seen my letters, it would have eliminated 2 streets where there are houses. It would have put in 2 new roads where there are currently houses. It would have rerouted 2 other roads where there are currently houses going right through their properties. It would have added 4 roundabouts where there are currently houses and eliminated those. And then the green space map showed 47 new high-end cottages that were going to be surrounded with a view of this green space, so that higher-end people, and it talked about, higher income people who wanted to live by and be able to shop at Levis Commons would be attracted to buy these homes, with the implication that they would be buying these homes so that they could sit in their higher-end homes and overlook their green space from their higher-end sunrooms. And Tim, at one of these recent meetings, you acknowledged that reading that plan, that's what the implication of anybody would have been. I mean, it was just dripping with Greed. It was dripping with greed. There's no way around it. And you heard the outpouring from the community that opposed that. So that's how the plan came to be, not because anybody associated with this community asked for it. And you also heard me say that in the beginning, I mean, how do you explain the fact that, particularly in light of the 1993 plan, that your consultants come out with a land use map, don't say a word about Perrysburg Heights that shows it being transformed into Levis Commons. And I have to think that that was sent to the city administration for review before it was issued in final form. Without saying a word, not one word, to alert anyone that it was even in that plan. And I just happened to, you know, when you're trained as a lawyer, you look at the details, and I just happened to see it. Otherwise, nobody would have known. It would have gone, sailed right through. We wouldn't be here today. I mean, it was shameful. It was absolutely shameful. That's the backdrop of all this. And it's not much for the city to be proud of. And it's not much to give any of these people any hope that there is any real concern or consideration for this community. So that's the first point. The second that I'd like to address briefly has to do with this development process. Because Ms. Aycock made the point that it's not giving people the full story, the full explanation, to simply say you don't have to sell and you'll be safe. Because that's not how the city from day one has envisioned the development process. And if you go back to the 1993 plan, everything up the Route 25 corridor was at the time in the township. And the 1993 plan said that you should plan for how you want everything in the township to develop so that you have control over it. And then the way you do it is to create your plan, and that is a roadmap for developers. The developers see it, they know what the city's going to approve, and it also talked about using the power of annexation to control it. That's all in the 1993 plan. It's very explicit. And so developers see what you want. They see it, Levis Commons, this is what the city's going to permit. They then go to the city, they say, this is what we want, and this is what we're planning. The city says, well, that's consistent with the plan. They then buy that land, they come to the city, they say, okay, now annex us. So the city says, okay, we'll annex you. And then they come back to the city and say, okay, now rezone us. And the city says, okay, we're rezoning you because what you've requested is consistent with the plan that we developed. The more recent plan says exactly the same thing. It's even more explicit in saying that it is a roadmap for the city to communicate to developers what its intentions and plans are for development. So the way it would work with Perrysburg Heights is that now you've got a roadmap. Now everybody has a roadmap knowing that the mayor and his administration are actually interested in redeveloping the entire Perrysburg Heights community with 40% commercial and a giant green space that, in the end, essentially eviscerates the entire community as it currently exists over a period of time. And all these people understand, all of the residents understand that nobody's going to take their land, that this is not something that happens overnight. But that's not the point. These people, these are human beings who have been in this community, who have worked their rear end off for almost 100 years. And I don't think any of them have any intention of being gone in 30 years. And home ownership has always been a very, very high priority in the Perrysburg Heights community. One resident told me that her father, when he came, thought it was the most important thing that he could do, and he worked to acquire a home for himself. He then helped his brothers acquire a home, all in Perrysburg Heights. And when those parents age out, when they get older, their children or their grandchildren move in, and eventually they take over their homes. And that's why there's so much continuity. That's why people stay in that neighborhood. And that's true of the entire community, including the 33 homes that would be affected by the revised map that Brody has put together. I understand that Brody was trying to come up with something that he thought was reasonable. But that doesn't mean that it's right. When we were here in early November, I heard all three of you say that it was really important to each of you individually to protect Perrysburg Heights. And that you didn't want us out of the land use plan because that would basically leave the community open to whatever the city wanted to do in the future, whatever this current administration wanted to do, however they decided to interpret the plans that existed. And I don't have any doubt that those expressions of concern were sincere. And Tim, going back to 1993, you went out of your way to try to make sure that the Perrysburg Heights community would be protected and that it would remain residential. And you said so in your remarks on November 10th at the outset of that meeting. And we sat down, as an organization and as residents from Perrysburg Heights, we sat down with you and you helped us work that out. And I know that there has been, that the discussion has been that, that we don't have enough specificity, and that's what Brody has told us, in order to really protect. But if you look at that 1993 plan, it's really hard to mistake what its intention is. I mean, you can try to interpret it in a way that's jaded, but its intention is pretty explicit, which is to leave that neighborhood, not part of the neighborhood, not 3/4 of the neighborhood, but to leave that neighborhood residential. And I understand that, that there are land use principles and zoning principles and the buffers are, something, a thing. I get that. But I don't think that this community is so worried about the issue of buffer that they would prefer to give up 30 homes eventually and turn them over to developers, just so that they can have a buffer. Those are homes that their parents and that their grandparents bought, and that they worked their rear ends off to try to acquire. And the people around them are not only their neighbors, in many cases their family, and they are people of importance. There really is no reason, there's no legitimate reason, other than maybe some land use principle that is not necessarily applicable in this situation and certainly not important to this community, that requires that you have a straight line rather than having a line that goes along the jagged jurisdictional boundary, and from that point to say that no further commercial development will be permitted in the future. It's a very simple thing. It's a very, very simple thing. There was a time when Perrysburg Heights, when the city of Perrysburg celebrated Perrysburg Heights as for its culture, for its traditions, for its history, and for the achievements of the people that live there, and for its diversity. But it just seems that now it's just celebrated because it's a potential source of income. I hope that's not the direction that we go. And I just want to tell you that this is not something you have to do. It's certainly not something that the community wants. Not a single person has spoken in favor of it. And I just, beg you not to do it.
So I've tried to make sure I was listening and understanding, and from the very get-go, it's been clear that you
that the Perrysburg Heights community did not want to be a part of the plan. And so I'm gonna follow suit, because it is in my particular choice to say you should be or you shouldn't be. Now, I'm listening to you and I hear you. However, to maybe reiterate what Corey was trying to say, I am inclined to include you to protect you. And immediately what comes to mind is that famous saying, and I don't even know who said it, that we're with the government and we're here to help you. And therefore, there's a certain distrust that goes with how we try to impose our abilities on you. I've looked at this, especially, so from the very beginning, this has been not a very good process. In my opinion, the reason there was no number put, which Teresa was the question you kept asking, is because it came about late in the process. And so there was no particular financial analysis, like with the other focus groups. That's my opinion. But when Brody came forward with this line, I kind of looked at it as a line in the sand. There will be no more encroachment of commercial property beyond that line. Now that's what the land use rules allow us to use as a way to control the type of growth that occurs. So if we're out of the plan and someone wants to be annexed, then we don't annex them, then we're taking their personal property rights away from them. And that puts us in a very precarious position as well, especially if there's one that's getting ready to come forward. So the consequence of that line in the sand is that there are residents that would be potentially purchased in commercial development. But on the west side of that line, there would be no, so there's a cost. And I've just looked at this, is there some way we have to limit commercial development? Even though we want commercial development, we don't want it there. And you don't have the ability to limit it if you're not in the land use plan. So that's my fear. But I've heard you. You don't want to be a part of the plan. But I have a feeling I'm going to regret not including you. So.
I just want to say one thing.
Sure.
Just to be clear, what we're saying is that we want your plan to specify that from the existing boundary of Perrysburg Heights, Perrysburg Township and the city of Perrysburg, from that point going all the way east to the eastern boundary, there will be no commercial development. You can put that language in your existing plan. That's what would address the concerns of the people in this room and the rest of the community. You don't have to exclude it. All you have to do is put that language. You can put it as a footnote if you want. It's a real simple thing to do.
Just leave the line the way it is. Fix the encroachments that exist now. Leave the line the way it is. Let it be jagged. Yeah, 25 runs like this. It's on an angle. Even if that line is almost straight, you're still gonna, you have to go so far back in order to make that line straight.
Yeah, so you had
So keep it jagged. Put that in your plan. Keep the line jagged. That's where it stops.
It's residential.
And I know that, and it'll stay as residential. And I know Brody, I emailed Brody about it, and he was not a fan of it. And I get from your position, Brody, why you're not. I don't want you to think that I don't like you as a person, but I don't like, unfortunately, the job that you're in and the decisions that you have to make, if that makes any sense.
That's fair.
Okay? I don't like the way you talk to people, but that's a whole different thing. But I get why you do it. I do it at work too. I understand. I get it. But my whole point is this: leave the jagged line the way it is. That's our plan. That's what we want. And we want you to incorporate that in your plan to leave it jagged, and we want those encroachments fixed that are on current property owners' property that they've been paying taxes on for years. For years. Believe me, I've asked already multiple attorneys to take this on, because to me, that's a class action lawsuit. And I want that. I'm gonna try my hardest, and I will go, I will die fighting until I get that.
All right, a comment on, I'm calling it Brody's plan, but I'm sorry to make it Brody focus on. Keep in mind, there have been references to the 1993 plan several times. That was 30 years ago. You update the comprehensive plan, you're supposed to. Shame on us, we haven't done it. You're supposed to do it every 10 years. In 1993, it was a whole different scenario. Levis Commons didn't exist. The plan anticipated that Levis Park across the street where Levis Commons is would be an industrial park. To give you a couple other, if you look carefully at that plan, the focus was that the one thing that they were right about was that the I-475-75 intersection was just massively unworkable and would be a disaster. And therefore, at that time, we were talking about having an access point on the 75 much further south, like about halfway between Perrysburg and Bowling Green. Well, fortunately for all of us, ODOT did one thing right, and I think improved that I-475, I-75 intersection to make it better. But that's just, in 1993, Levis Commons didn't exist. I'm not sure Shops of River Place existed. And even if you look at the 93 plan, if you look at it carefully, I mean, Anita underlined this before, that the area where we have commercial development now was designated as single-family residential with limited flexibility. As Paul said, the 93 plan, again, if you read it on the whole, 25 was viewed, it was dubbed the South Employment Corridor. It was supposed to be an area in which the city could pursue some degree of growth that involved employment. And a whole lot's happened since then. We had the 99-year agreement. I'm just mentioning this to tell you, I guess, two things. The 93 plan, I've heard it said, I think Anita wrote it and others, that, you know, that a promise was made to preserve the heights unchanged, almost literally with no change whatsoever, forever. Well, along 25, it changed. There's commercial development there. And I would submit to you that a mayor and council in 1993 can't bind a mayor and council 30 years later. And what I think this compromise represented was a recognition that we as representatives of the city have to look at the community blueprint and say, okay, look, as you're approaching the 25 corridor, what's across the street from all those properties? One of the biggest, most successful mixed-use projects we've had in the city probably ever. So yes, it is a natural area eventually. And given how we let 30 years go by without any real reasonable update of the comprehensive plan, who knows? It could be 10, 20, 30. The city, if it's planning for the community properly, should recognize that, I think you pointed this out earlier, yes, there's going to be pressure for commercial development out there. And that's not necessarily a thing that we as representatives of the city or the community should discourage, in my view. I want us to do as much as we can to preserve the heights, and I know I've been brought to task for saying don't sell your property, but that's the reality. If, though, people decide to sell their property, this gives us, I won't disagree with Paul's characterization, a roadmap as to how it should go if if the property owner desires to change to commercial. Someone could buy it and want to do residential. Someone, I don't know, someone could say that if they can amass enough land that they do some multifamily development there right across from Levis. I don't know. So I'm going to sound much like Barry and Corey. I think this compromise represents the best means to accommodate those interests, both the interests of trying to preserve the heights to the fullest extent we reasonably can, and yet allow for, the reason the jagged line is eliminated is that you've got commercial fronting 25. Yes, there's going to be some attraction for commercial to come near it. Well, if you're going to do it in a coordinated way, as we do all over the city, where you create some ways to get in and about and through. We don't want to put a bunch of junk commercial out there. We want to put good commercial that's successful. So I support this plan, but I recognize what you're saying, that it's not acceptable. I don't, we need a motion. I guess the motion would be to remove the heights as a focus group in the comprehensive plan.
I think it's, I would suggest we perhaps do a recommendation as the committee and then let both plans be presented at the council.
Oh, sure, yeah, definitely.
Agreed. So I guess I would move to a recommendation that the heights be removed from the land use plan as a focus area.
Okay. Second?
3-0.
All right. That's what we'll do. Jody, is that a clear enough direction for you to figure out where to go from here, or we try to?
So I guess is the next step then to present the city council the full final draft of land use plan that excludes Perrysburg Heights, not, there was some mention of a second option.
I think that's their option, is to check.
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, I guess this is bringing finality to it where we proofread, go through, touch up the entire document, move it forward with a complete exclusion of Perrysburg Heights from mention of the plan. The color coding on the map to be removed and focus site.
The color coding that Paul referred to, that called it
Yes.
some sort of
Mixed use.
mixed use or something. Yeah, I definitely want that.
Yeah, I do too.
So it's basically all references and traces of Perrysburg Heights will be removed from.
Well, if they're an existing land use.
It'll recognize the existing land use inventory, but as far as, projecting outwards,
Well, that would be our recommendation.
That would be our recommendation. I think that there's going to be significant discussion in council, would be my guess as well.
yeah, I guess I just need to know if the exclusion plan is moving forward or if it's moving forward in tandem with the first option, the Brody option, or the newly created
I
option.
think we get rid of the first option.
Yes, I think the Brody option would be what the city council would be interested in.
So it'll move forward with a preference. Both options will move forward to city council for final consideration.
One is 03 again. I would vote
Version 2
no
version
on
3
Brody.
going forward.
Yes.
Before you all vote, can I just make a suggestion, request for a third option, that all three options be presented to the full city council. The first being that it be removed, which is, I guess, what you guys are saying as an option. I don't think that's what you're hearing today from the residents. The second is Brody's option, his map. And the third is the option that I described and that I think Anita read into the record, which is that the land use plan reflect limitation on development in Perrysburg, in the existing jurisdictional boundaries of Perrysburg Heights to single-family residential.
So, my question, Paul, so I'm looking at the township. So, are you guys, because you keep saying single-family residential, and that's not necessarily what the township zoning is?
It is a single-family, I checked with the township, it's single-family residential high density.
So it's high density, which reads, so it's suburban residential high density. The purpose of R4A district is to promote variety of housing options, single family, multiple dwellings, permanently sited manufactured housing, specialized housing types, of assisted living at a higher density that's permitted in the R4 district. This district shall be serviced by central water and sewer facilities and found in areas which are typically located in close proximity to community facilities which are needed on a regular basis. So that's what it's my understanding of what the current township zoning is. But you would like it to be in the city's plan as single family?
Well,
residential, or would you like it to mirror what the township zoning is?
Well, preferably it would mirror what the township has.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's an important characterization because it allows for a single family.
Well taken. But I just think the council ought to have all three options before the.
And I don't have a problem. I think that would naturally probably come up in conversation anyway. Should we move all three forward with a recommendation on the one?
Well, I mean, Paul will bring that forward anyways. I guess if we can, in the interest of organizing the discussion, say that it's that. The only, I'm not entirely with Paul on his idea. I don't have a problem with language along the lines of we view it as desirable. It's going to be compromised language you're not going to like, folks aren't going to like, but to preserve to the fullest extent possible, considering, think all of the lawyer words, the residential character of the area, and things like that. But kind of what you're asking is that we kind of, even though it's land outside the city, we reverse zone it as if it were in the city.
But Tim, that's part of the land use planning process. I think.
Yeah,
I understand. Right, that's what you do.
Well, the land use plan kind of tries to organize future development, but to be honest with you, the government doesn't control that. I mean, that has to be controlled by the private sector.
We're talking about a plan now.
Yeah, guided by a plan, and we can state our preferences in a plan.
If they controlled, we probably wouldn't have seen the first version of the land use plan that we saw.
Yeah. Well, but then I'd ask out loud, why did we have commercial development on 25? In the area that was supposed to be single family?
Because nobody asked.
That's right. Well,
nobody bothered to ask the residents if that was okay.
No. Well, these annexations don't occur in the dark, but I'll grant you, people may not have been aware.
Yeah, of course.
But commercial uses started happening, and we still didn't hear objection.
It's not because the neighborhood supported it. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I'm not suggesting that.
Okay, so we agree on that.
So and Paul and all of you could be there to advocate for a third option if you wish, but I'd say
my recommendation would be against that because in the totality, looking at everything, I have to take into account the city's interests in zoning and land use plans. That's simply why I wouldn't recommend that one personally. I think Brody's plan is a cognizable negotiation of the two interests, the competing interests. But you tell me you don't want that either. So I'm following your lead on that, and I'm just going to vote for. My recommendation personally will be the third plan to just leave the heights out of it.
Okay. So as I understand it, the three options are just eliminate the heights as a focus area. Option 2 is continue to include the heights as a focus area, retooled in the manner suggested, and we got to come up with a new name for it. Yes. The manner suggested by the Brody plan. And option 3 is to maybe take option 1, which is just make no change. And Paul would say, affirmatively state that the city, I'll state it in very strong terms, the city will allow no further commercial development beyond the existing commercial development along 25. We'll present it that way.
Yeah,
I told you I have alternatives.
I think Anita read some proposed language in the record.
Yeah, I have read that.
Yeah, you can present that.
Forward that on.
Yes. So, all right, so we'll present those now. Committee, turning apart from the heights, I think, Brody, you're asking us, is the rest of the plan ready to go forward to council?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking.
Okay. There are some aspects of that plan other than the heights that I want to have at least a brief discussion about, so.
I think we should as well.
Yeah, so let's plan on the following schedule. Next month, we'll look at the balance of the plan, and then what are we into? What month are we in now, March? That'll be April. So then, the full plan will likely go to council in May, June, okay. I mean, we'll publicize that. We got a public information officer now, but that's all social media stuff, which I don't know how to use. So I always like to have some contact persons. Could we use Paul and Leah as so that you know when it's going to council? Is that a good way for you to get the word out? That it's going to be considered? I mean, it'll be out in other ways, but we had a project recently, you know, we did all that, and still the neighbors hadn't picked up on it. So I'd like to have a live person. We can tell, okay, this is going to council on XYZ date.
How soon will you know that?
I don't see Paul or Leah.
I'm asking you how soon you will know that information.
Well, we'll get it to you, I would say, certainly at least 2 weeks before the council meeting.
That's fine, you can contact me.
And I would assume there may be more than one reading on this land use plan, I guess. So there may be more.
Whatever dates, just send them over to me. Brody, you have my email. I mean, he can share it. If you want me to email you guys, I can separately. But I mean, just send it to me. I'll coordinate with my committee and have them set up something so that way we have a in public discussion. So that way they know about those dates printed out. I want it printed out. Is I don't think that I'm not transparent. I kind of felt like people were saying I wasn't. I think I'm very transparent. I've collaborated with you multiple times. So I don't think my message is getting mixed up.
It ain't been mixed up what I heard.
No.
Tim, I'd like to know when it's going to go. And the sooner, you know, as much advance notice as you can give us.
Yeah, if we can, I'd like to stage it, if possible, that we can maybe have a month's advance notice, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. You need to pick up on what Corey said. You know, a lot of things we pass the first night. This is certainly not one of those. This will go through, I would think, 2 readings, if not 3. But having said that, before it hits council's desk the first time, we'll get it out through all our usual communication channels, and then we'll use Leah and Paul to give notice to you separately. So we'll do it that way, and so you'll know the next step is occurring. So I thank you all for attending. We have other fascinating agenda items.
Do you mind if we take a quick recess?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, there.
We'll take a break. And any of you are welcome to stay, but you're free to go.